Imagine you're scrolling through your phone at 2 a.m. You see a young mother, beautiful and composed, sitting in a television studio. She is talking about grief. She has written a children's book to help her 3 sons process the sudden loss of their father. She calls it, "Are You With Me?" The host calls her brave. The audience applauds. Now imagine that 11 months earlier, the same woman had typed into her phone, "What is a lethal dose of fentanyl?" Imagine that the father she was eulogizing on television had died from exactly that, 5 times the lethal amount, dissolved in a Moscow Mule she had made him herself. Imagine that the book about grief was written by a ghostwriter, and that in a text message to her brother, she admitted she was only publishing it to understand the book writing process to get ready for the big one. This is the story of Kouri Richins, and the most terrifying part isn't that she might have done it, it's how close she came to getting away with it. Kouri and Eric Richins lived in Camas, Utah, Summit County, one of the wealthiest counties in the state. On Instagram, their life looked perfect. They hunted, they traveled, they hosted, they had 3 sons. But prosecutors would later allege that the image was a mask. Behind closed doors, Kouri Richins was drowning in debt. Her mother described it as a constant rotation: buy houses, flip them, sell them. But the math wasn't working. Prosecutors claimed she was underwater by nearly $2 million. And Eric? He was beginning to suspect something was wrong. On Valentine's Day 2022, just 17 days before his death, Eric ate a sandwich his wife had prepared. Within hours, he was fighting for his life. Hives, trouble breathing, a violent reaction that sent him to the edge. He survived. But before he recovered, he told his family something that should have changed everything. "If I die, you need to look at her, because I think she's trying to kill me." He was 39 years old. He was a hunter. He coached his son's sports teams. And he had just looked his wife in the eye and seen something that terrified him. The question is, why didn't anyone listen? Eric survived Valentine's Day, but investigators would later discover that the attempt wasn't the end of the story. It was only the first draft. What happened in those 17 days is where the case turns from tragedy into calculation. On February 26, 2022, 12 days after the poisoning, Kouri Richins contacted a woman named Carmen Lauber. Lauber cleaned houses for Kouri's real estate business. She also had a criminal record for drug distribution. Kouri paid $1,300 with a check drawn from her own business account. Prosecutors would later call this the Michael Jackson drug, and they would allege that Kouri Richins now had enough fentanyl in her possession to kill a grown man 5 times over. But here is where the story gets worse. Investigators discovered that Kouri had taken out nearly $2 million in life insurance policies on her husband. One of them, for $100,000, bore a signature that forensic experts would testify was forged. The policy had gone into effect on February 4, 2022, 1 month before Eric's death. Eric Richins didn't know his signature had been duplicated on a document that valued his life at $100,000. He didn't know his wife had purchased industrial-strength fentanyl 12 days after trying to poison him with a sandwich. He didn't know that while he was teaching his oldest son to cast a fly rod in a river, the countdown had already started. He had 17 days left, and he spent them trying to be a father. March 4th, 2022. Kouri told investigators they were celebrating. A real estate deal was closing. She made Eric a Moscow Mule: vodka, ginger beer, lime. What Eric didn't know was what prosecutors would later claim she had added to the drink. At some point that evening, he consumed it. They went to bed. In the early hours of March 5th, Kouri called 911. She told dispatchers Eric was unconscious, cold to the touch. When first responders arrived, Eric Richins was already gone. The initial assumption was natural causes. A 39-year-old man in apparent health, no signs of trauma, no forced entry, no struggle. But then the autopsy came back. Fentanyl, 5 times the lethal dose, ingested orally. The Moscow Mule was the delivery system. The celebration was the cover. And Kouri Richins? She signed the closing documents on her real estate deal the next day, while her husband's body was still in the county morgue. This is where the case breaks open. On April 13th, 2022, police informed Kouri that her husband had died of a fentanyl overdose. She had every reason to believe she was in the clear. No arrest, no charges, just a grieving widow trying to raise 3 boys. But investigators would later recover something she had tried to hide: her search history. Between April 16th and June 6th, 2022, while she was publicly mourning her husband, Kouri Richins was privately researching what happens to deleted messages. How do police recover deleted data from phones? Signs of being under federal investigation. What is a lethal dose of fentanyl? How long do life insurance companies take to pay? And perhaps the most chilling search of all: luxury prisons for the wealthy in the United States. She wasn't researching grief, she was researching survival. But what she didn't know was that while she was searching for luxury prisons, another search was happening in a different house. Eric's sister, Kouri Richins, had started her own investigation. Kouri Richins didn't believe the official story. She compiled the insurance documents, she found the forged signatures, she connected the February fentanyl purchase to the March death. She became, in effect, the detective that the system had failed to provide. And while Kouri was building a case in private, Kouri was building a brand in public. In March 2023, 1 year after Eric's death, Kouri Richins published Are You With Me?, a children's book about grief, written, she claimed, by a loving mother who had personally faced this challenge. But the investigators discovered the truth. The book was written by a ghostwriter, and in a text message to her brother, Kouri admitted the real reason she published it: to understand the book writing process to get ready for the big one. She appeared on Good Things Utah. She smiled for the cameras. She held up her book and told the audience how important it was to help children process loss. All while Eric's family was compiling evidence that she had caused the loss she was now monetizing. On May 8, 2023, the evidence became an arrest warrant. Police arrived at the Richins home. Kouri was led away in handcuffs. The grieving widow became the prime suspect. But the most shocking reveal was still to come. The trial began in March 2026. Prosecutors laid out a case built on fragments that, together, formed a devastating picture. The fentanyl, the forged insurance signature, the search history, the $1,300 check, the Valentine's Day poisoning that Eric had survived, the 17 days between the first attempt and the second. The defense argued there was no confession, no video of her pouring the drug, no eyewitness to the act itself. They asked the jury to consider that a grieving mother had been unfairly targeted by suspicious in-laws. But the jury looked at the calendar. They looked at the fact that a woman who had just tried to poison her husband with a sandwich purchased stronger poison 12 days later. They looked at the forged insurance signature. They looked at the search history that began only after police told her how Eric died. And they concluded that this was not a widow. This was an architect. On March 16, 2026, the jury returned a verdict. Guilty. Aggravated murder. Attempted aggravated murder. Insurance fraud. Forgery. Kouri Richins sat motionless as the verdict was read. She had spent 3 years maintaining her innocence. The jury had spent 3 hours destroying it. The sentencing hearing was held on May 13, 2026. Eric would have turned 44. What happened in that courtroom is something you do not forget. Kouri. I will never quit or give up on this fight for injustice, the truth, and coming home to you. Counselor. Reading oldest son. I'm afraid if she gets out, she will come after me and my brothers. I don't miss Kouri. I will tell you that. Kouri. Be like your dad. Counselor. Reading youngest son. Once she is gone, I will feel happy, and I will feel safer and relaxed and trust people more. Kouri. Never admit to something you didn't do, and never beg for mercy for something you didn't do. Counselor. Reading middle son. You took away my dad for no reason other than greed, and you only cared about yourself and your stupid boyfriends. Kouri. I love you, and I will see you again. Judge Mrazek. She is simply too dangerous to ever be free. Kouri Richins is currently serving her sentence in Utah. She is appealing. Eric's 3 sons are growing up in the care of his sister, Katie, and her husband, Clint. The oldest is now a teenager. The youngest is in middle school. They are, by all accounts, doing what children do, surviving, growing, learning to trust again. But here is the detail that stays with you. If you go on Amazon right now, you can still buy Are You With Me? The cover is still pink. The reviews are still there. The Look Inside button still works. The book Kouri Richins published to practice for the big one is still generating profit, still sitting in shopping carts, still being read by parents who have no idea that the author was convicted of murdering the father whose loss she claimed to be mourning. The Mask is still selling.